All right. Once again, welcome everybody. So what would it mean for people to decide where the energy that powers our homes, our schools, our hospitals, and our greater community comes from? What would we do differently instead of relying on investor-owned corporate utilities like PG&E that clearly prioritize profits over people? I want to take a few steps back to define what community choice is for anybody who might not know. Community choice aggregation policy, often referred to as CCAs, was passed in 2002 as Assembly Bill 117. This allows cities and counties to establish local energy agencies that provide clean energy and, more importantly, take over the electrical portion of our PG&E bills, thereby keeping the money local. This model is a hybrid system, and I will never say that it's perfect because it's not, as the utilities still own the transmission of electricity and the billing. I want to give a special shout out to our sister organization, Reclaim Our Power, who is pushing for municipalization and a statewide publicly owned utility that actually takes over the transmission wire system as well. Local Clean Energy was founded back in 2008, originally to build a movement for an East Bay Community Choice Energy Agency as a way to address the opportunity for localizing resources in the same way as we see food, where local production creates clean energy jobs, circulates wealth, reduces pollution, improves health, and thereby creating affordability, energy resilience, and curbing climate change at the same time. Local Clean Energy Alliance, with the help of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance organizations, has held AVA Community Energy accountable to the commitments made at the agency's inception back in 2016 and reaffirmed in the 2018 Local Development Business Plan, a plan to build local clean energy programs and projects throughout the territory it serves. We believe in clean energy assets that they should be local and democratized and locally controlled. Just last year, our most vulnerable communities have been suffering mega storms like bomb cyclones, for example, and mega wildfires that have caused loss of life, massive property damage, and prolonged power outages. Right now, we are currently advocating for two critical issues. One is transparency and accountability of millions of dollars in surplus funds within the AVA Community Energy Program. We are advocating for at least 15 million to go directly towards energy resilience so that we can weather these storms that we're living in. The second issue is the focus of this webinar today, advocating for a strong workforce and environmental justice standards with a statewide alliance between organizations in all three branches. At this moment, where thousands of jobs and renewable energy projects are being brought online, we need your help to keep AVA Community Energy in Alameda and San Joaquin County accountable to this commitment to a just transition and set the standard for community choice statewide. Again, I want to thank you for joining. We have a great panel. And with that, I would love to pass the mic to one of my partners in crime, Ratha with Critical Impact Consulting.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you to the LCA team for hosting me. I think we wanted to do a quick panel introduction of all the panelists before we get started. My name is Ratha. I'm the founder and executive director of Critical Impact Consulting. I help government agencies and community organizations tackle their biggest problems and achieve their biggest dreams. And I'm super honored to be here and to help facilitate this process. And I think we'll go next to Alexis.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So glad to be on here. My name is Alexis. I'm one of the energy equity managers at the California Environmental Justice Alliance, or CEJA. Super happy to be here. Pass it to the next person.
Yeah, Jason.
Yep, I think that's me. Thank you, Alexis. My name is Jason Gumataotao. I'm a state certified journey level electrician. I'm also a union member with IBEW Local 595 here in Alameda County. And I'll pass it over to Eric.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Veium. I'm a climate organizer. I lead the Slow Climate Coalition in San Luis Obispo County, and I also am coordinator for the CCA Workforce and Environmental Justice Standards Alliance. And Olivia.
Thank you. My name is Olivia. My name is Olivia Eldred, and I am the chair of the Community Advisory Committee for Ava Community Energy. I also sit on the board of directors and was lucky enough to hold that position at the agency's founding. And during the day, I run the labor compliance department for affordable housing construction and am really honored to be here.
All right. Thank you all to all our panelists, and thank you all for everybody who's joining today. Really, really appreciate y'all's time and interest in this topic. So before we get started with each of the panelists, I did want to give a little bit of background context and why this issue is important. So I've been advocating for CCAs since CCAs were a wee little baby, and they were just starting out. Getting started all across California. And at that time, there were questions about whether CCAs could be sustainable, could generate enough revenue, and be able to be to sustain themselves. Now, fast forwarding to today, we have 10 CCAs in California, and they are all making a tremendous amount of revenue, collectively totaling into the millions. And in 2021, the CEOs of 10 CCAs got together to form California Community Power, a statewide entity where there are no elected officials represented, yet all the 10 CEOs of the CCAs are able to aggregate all 10 CCAs buying power to accelerate our renewable energy infrastructure for California within the next short several years. Now, while this intention is good, the proposed standards severely lack protections, equity and inclusion for workers, the environment, and environmental justice communities. This is a problem. When there is no democratic representation, no representation of the principles and values each group has fought hard for in the past decade, we lose out on a just transition. Now, at the 11th hour back in 2021, when these standards were trying to get passed through, our group was able to submit a letter signed by several organizations representing environment, the environmental justice, and labor unions detailing the deficiencies of these policies. And so, for example, the environmental justice standards that they had such a low bar, they basically said, we're not going to use slave labor. There was no mention about meaningful engagement, community benefits, workforce protection, and more. So luckily, our letter was able, along with advocacy and people speaking out in public comment, we were able to intervene and stop that policy standards at that level. And what happened today, and what happened then, was that they wanted every CCA to pass workforce environment and environmental justice standards. And that's what brings us here today. Today in the Bay Area, we're seen as progressive leaders in social justice and environmental justice. So right now is the absolutely right time to be furthering our leadership and advocacy of democratizing our energy. And so I am super excited to have our wonderful panelists take a deeper dive on each critical point of this model language being heard at AVA Community Energy, why it's so important, and to provide some strategy and direction on how we can advocate and the impact that we will have at the statewide level. So first up is Alexis. And so for the question for Alexis, CEJA's report, Building a Just Energy Future, a framework for community choice aggregators to power equity and democracy in California, was critical to the policy intervention at CC Power, as well as crafting the model language being proposed now. However, right now, AVA Community Energy staff has removed recommendations of meaningful engagement, community benefits, economic inclusion, and transparency. Can you tell us why are these points important and what happens if we don't get these recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I first want to start out, thank you for that question, and want to start out by thanking you all for having CEJA featured in this webinar. As some of you may know, CEJA has an alliance of 10 member organizations who are working across different regions in California, working with communities on the ground who are on the front lines of fossil fuel pollution and harm. And what we do is we unite that local organizing of our members to push for statewide change in order to advance environmental justice in California. I've been here at CEJA for about 4 years, supporting the Alliance's energy work in particular. And I bring this up because in 2020, I was actually completing my first year at CEJA as a program fellow, and it was the year that we were also working on our best practices for community choice aggregators report within the Energy Committee. So I'll call this our CCA report for short as I continue on, and I could definitely drop a link to it in the chat as soon as I finish answering this question. But essentially, we wrote this CCA report in response to the really rapid emergence of CCAs in California, as folks have talked about already. And we recognized there was huge potential in them to help redesign the energy system with far-reaching benefits for customers, ratepayers, and for environmental justice communities. But we also knew, thanks in large part by a lot of the warnings from our fellow, energy democracy, energy justice friends, we also knew that CCAs may also run the risk of just becoming another business as usual bureaucracy that can be out of touch with communities. And perhaps they'd only become just marginally better than the competing investor-owned utility, or who knows, maybe even worse, right? So with that in mind, CEJA members outlined 5 core recommendations in our CCA report, which were: 1, coordinate with local community-based organizations, or CBOs. 2, make information and outreach accessible. 3, commit to community-driven local program design. 4, ensure transparent decision-making. And 5, ensure you're meeting local and state accountability. So while all of these are important, I did really want to highlight recommendations 1 and 3 for this moment that we're in. As I said, recommendation 1 was that CCA should coordinate with local CBOs that are working with communities on the ground. This is really important for CCAs like AVA to really build meaningful long-term partnerships with CBOs that are not just extractive kind of one-off transactions, but rather an ongoing relationship. We also encourage CCAs to even compensate CBOs for their time and expertise when this is possible. And we noted that this type of ongoing relationship can help CCAs better connect with the communities that they're serving and understand the portfolio of disadvantaged communities and low-income customers that are within their service territory, as well as the different languages spoken and how to make information as accessible and transparent as possible. I also wanted to point out recommendation number 3 for CCAs to commit to making their local program design fully community driven. In order to ensure this happens, we highlighted some important issues for CCAs to incorporate in their programs. For instance, in the procurement process, CCAs should be prioritizing jobs and economic development opportunities, local distributed energy resources, air quality improvements, low-income customer optimization, and protections for disadvantaged communities during emergencies. Additionally, we noted that CCA should be developing a process to ensure that this design is community-driven and to see whether potential resources and programs are actually providing benefits and meeting the needs identified by the communities. So unfortunately, as the great work of LCEA and others on this call and attending this webinar kind of have highlighted, unfortunately, AVA's proposal for this workforce and EJ policy has fallen very short in many of these areas, which is extremely disappointing. I can talk to how disappointing it is right now, unless there's another question, Ratha.
Please do, Alexis.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so again, CEJA's super grateful for folks who are working with AVA, providing recommendations to make this a better and stronger policy. One of the main motivations CEJA had in doing this research in the first place was the desire for this report to really serve as a resource and a tool for advocates, decision makers, CCAs, and other energy entities to advance energy democracy and energy justice. And we knew how critical it was going to be for these community-led groups to really lead the way and be actively engaged and committed to checking and working with their local CCA. So to kind of answer the question around what this all, what from the report to now this moment, what this all means for environmental justice, the fact that AVA community energy staff are leaving out meaningful recommendations that we had in our report and leaving out the proposed recommendations from community-led groups is extremely disheartening, and it's disappointing. As we've kind of started to mention, as EJ advocates, we really want CCAs to succeed so that we can draw down power away from corporate and corrupt and profit-hungry investor-owned utilities and bring them to our communities. But it doesn't mean that we're just going to blindly support any other energy entity, especially when they're not doing right by communities. Community choice aggregators have community in their name, and we really think they need to be held to a higher standard. So for this reason, just to sum it all up and heed my time, really think it's extremely important for environmental justice, for AVA to be setting a precedent in this EJ and workforce policy and adopt something that's stronger. Without this intentional commitment, we have to repeat that CCAs do run the risk of continuing business as usual practices and contributing to legacies of environmental injustice. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Alexis. And for those who are attending, please put in any questions that you have in the chat and direct them to any panelists that you want. And yeah, one of the things I'm really excited about this alliance is the connection between environmental justice and labor unions. And Jason has been instrumental in this alliance and being able to help represent labor unions. And Jason, my question for you and for the audience here today is what if we were able to get these policies passed in the model language form that we want? What makes you excited? What are the outcomes that will impact the well-being of workers? And if you can, please share a little bit about your own journey and how unions are achieving greater inclusion of traditionally disadvantaged communities.
All right, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Ratha. Afternoon, everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Jason Gumataotao. A little bit more about myself. I'm a first-generation Chamorro American. I was raised in San Leandro in Alameda County. The neighborhood that I was raised in sort of backed up to 880 back when there wasn't a sound wall, back when we had cyclone fences and, likely breathing in asbestos breaks on from the diesels behind me, underneath the runway, the landing strip, right, for Oakland Airport, and about a quarter mile away was my parents still live down the street from Waste Management's transfer station. So sort of adding all those things up, growing up, that's just where I lived. I was fortunate to be exposed to the construction industry about 25 years ago, I say now. I've been in the electrical construction industry for about, this is my 22nd year. But what I wanted to share is that over the last few years, as the lead organizer in IBEW Local 595, I've learned about sort of the other side of the construction part of the industry. Never really had an idea of sort of the contracting side and sort of what it takes to get projects sort of procured. But one of the things I've learned was sort of, I learned more about disadvantaged communities or disadvantaged zip codes in that way. I didn't know that I was raised in a disadvantaged zip code. That's just where I was raised. And what I found was that there was all these things. And I think that's, these are some of the things that contributed to, or they contribute to why perhaps a community is listed in that way. And so, policies like what, we have proposed as a group are, trying to address opportunities that, aren't there for others in my community that I was raised, in the community that I live in, as well as, the greater communities in the state of California. And, how do you provide meaningful, workforce opportunities for people to either get out of, communities similar to that, or how they can actually help contribute to improve the communities, improve those communities that they're living in. One way is through the construction industry, and sort of connected to ABA and those opportunities that will be, sort of provided over the years on, so rebuilding infrastructure, creating new energy sources, and how do you connect the community to building those, as well as being able to sort of be educated consumers, around that. A little bit, I guess, the sort of the last part about my sort of story, I was sort of exposed to the entire construction industry. I ended up learning more about the electrical side of it. And, it took a while for me to get in. Not everybody gets in to apprenticeship opportunities very quickly. It took me about 3 years before I was actually accepted. And but it was something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to learn more about it, and I also learned that it's just not it's not easy to get into. Furthermore, when I got in, I put all my work in, and now I'm also a trustee with our apprenticeship program. We accept annually about anywhere from 40 to 50 apprentices, and we graduate that approximately the same number. We could accept more if there's more work that's available for those apprentices to be able to do. So one of the things that looks a little bit different with apprenticeship programs, when you're talking about, workforce development, when we accept apprentices, we have to be able to sort of track 5 years worth of work for those apprentices. So not only do they get classroom instruction, they have to be working for 5 years. And so jobs that will be created through AVA can sort of be part of that pipeline of work opportunities for apprentices when they're in our program or any of the other, construction programs that would sort of be sort of partnered with AVA. As an example of sort of how, outcomes, positive outcomes can be achieved. I live in Oakland now. All my children are in OUSD proper schools, and in Oakland Unified, we have loads of capital projects that are being performed. There are labor standards that are attached to these projects. I also sit on that advisory commission that monitors, contractors and their practices and their hiring practices. And, with those labor standards, there are also sort of corrective actions or opportunities for that. So if a contractor is not maybe, hitting some of the goals that are sort of attached with those standards, like, there's 100% Oakland resident with regard to apprenticeship hours, and there's 50%, Oakland resident as far as all of the work being performed. And so if a contractor is not meeting those goals, there's a way to be able to track it and support those contractors to improve those numbers to help provide more opportunities for Oakland residents, on that work. And so to be able to have, similar language that AVA can adopt, this is another tool to be able to help not only Oakland residents, but, residents throughout, AVA's sort of jurisdiction, to provide them, workforce opportunities or job opportunities to help build a career at least in the construction industry. Hopefully I captured everything.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. And and then so the next question is for Olivia. So Olivia, I got a 2-part question for you. And we're building off this thread of jobs coming in, but also what about the just transition, and how do we make sure that all communities are included? And I know you've done a lot of work in advocating between that. And so, the 2 questions I have for you, and the first one is, how do small local emerging businesses also be included in this period of energy transition? And also, what advocacy lessons can we learn And what advice do you have for participants today to be able to engage Ava Community Energy?
Thanks, Ratha. Those are really good questions. So I guess I'd like to start by making sure that we're all framed in the same space. All the money that we're talking about, every project that we talk about, this money, whether it's for projects or programs or energy procurement or anything else, it comes from this community. All of the dollars that we're talking about are dollars that we pay when we spend our electric bill or when we pay our electric bill. And we, as members of the community and the people funding these projects, should have a say in how that money is spent. Down to who we choose to build the projects, what the projects are, where they're located, who they employ. These decisions have so many ramifications. Which businesses get the contracts for building or installing physical infrastructure, for running and maintaining those projects. Again, a lot of ramifications. So local dollars stay local at a much higher rate than dollars spent far away. We do know that. Which businesses get contracts heavily influences which workers get jobs. Large scale or utility scale power is almost always located far away. We have one project locally. There's a couple ones that are being considered or built in some of the expansion territory, but most of the projects are located kind of far away. And that means that they never employ local workers or almost never employ local workers, and that the companies who are hired to do that work are also located far away, which means all of our ratepayer dollars are going to other companies, businesses that are not local, workers who are not local. So small, local, and emerging businesses, which we call SLEBs, because it's easier than saying all those words. That's really where you start seeing the employment benefits of going to our community and keeping those dollars as local as possible. To look specifically at our resolution, this resolution, the way that it was originally proposed, includes specific language about hiring local workers, also hiring equity priority workers. And for folks who are unfamiliar with that language, equity priority workforce are individuals who live in disadvantaged zip codes, like was mentioned earlier, make below a certain dollar amount, or face another whole series of circumstances, situations that mean that they experience wage discrimination at a higher rate than other folks. The language has been changed inside of the county away from communities of concern, because that's kind of condescending, or disadvantaged workers and things like that. It's not only helped folks track track how many of the individuals we really are employing, but the language is more inclusive and accurate, because this is a priority workforce and for equity reasons. So this resolution, the way that it was originally put in, has language around hiring of equity priority workforces, utilization of small local businesses, and another thing that Jason touched on, which I really appreciated what you said. So we want union jobs, we want high level prevailing wage jobs, and we want these jobs in sectors that maybe don't have prevailing wage established yet, or don't have unions really doing that scope of work, or don't have good pipelines for the people living in our communities to get into yet, right? There's not always real clear pathways to get into these jobs, and especially in these sectors that are just emerging now, we have not yet developed union work for all these jobs. And one of the things that was really impressive to me about this resolution is how forward thinking the team that wrote this is with making sure that we aren't excluding those people, that there are roads to high road jobs. Like, we have a way to get people from our communities into these positions. And I believe that is some of the language that is being taken out. I haven't looked at the most recent version today, at least. So I personally have some concerns around some of the language that's being stripped out of there, and really want to make sure that we are ensuring that SLEBs, the small local emerging businesses, get the work that our dollars are funding. And the way that we do that is by being local. Like, we can't say you need to hire this many small local businesses if the project is located in Arizona. Or if it's large scale, like, it just doesn't work on a practical level. And this investment in large scale utility in other areas in other states has been the majority of investments and procurements recently. Those investments need to be made locally. They can be made locally. Both the projects and the programs that AVA is looking at, these things are jobs. They also have massive public health impacts, and there's a lot of choices that are going to be made in there. Not everyone can afford an electric vehicle, for example, but if especially folks living in equity priority communities. So while like all the charging stations that are going into disadvantaged zip codes might be great for the folks who can afford electric vehicles who live in them, or the people who want to move to them, that really doesn't have equitable benefits for folks. But if instead we changed out all the garbage and recycling trucks or delivery vehicles and other fleet vehicles in an area, that has the positive health impacts that would be shared by folks living in those communities without requiring they put out additional dollars. If we used some of the funds to ramp up, so really good work. There's some really good work happening at AVA, like fantastic. There's work being done around resilience hubs. It just needs to be ramped up considerably more. So instead of building large scale in Arizona, which I think we've got several of those projects happening, we really focused on getting rooftop solar on low income multi-unit affordable housing structures, on more hospitals, community centers, building resiliency hubs. We could not only power our community, but also employ local folks. And sorry for how long this is taking, but that last question about what we can do about it, is you have to go talk to the board. Like, our board is appointed. They aren't appointed because they have expertise in utilities. They're appointed because everybody in the city council sits on boards, and somebody has to sit on this one, and somebody may or may not have an interest, but they come over. They usually don't know what's going on. So they rely on staff as the experts. And to be clear, staff are experts. They are experts in the way that they've done the job for a long time, but they got their experience working in the industry, in the utilities, that we are saying, we don't want it done like this anymore. But professional staff will do things the way they've been done unless they are directed by the board to do it differently, because they're trying to protect the agency. It's not even a bad motivation, right? So the only way that the board is going to direct them to do something differently is if you meet with them. Your constituents meet with your board members. Every one of them is an elected official. The sign-on letters and things like that are really good for crisis situations that are coming up. send them an email, call their office, set up a meeting and talk to them. And you don't need to talk to them about this, like any specific thing entirely. Talk to them about the values that you hold. Say, this is me, this is where I live, this is what I do, this is why I care. Like, build locally, make jobs here, work on our air, stop sending everything far away. Just speak from your perspective, and they will start looking at the recommendations that are brought to them through that lens. We have openings coming up on the Community Advisory Committee. Please apply. We need folks to come in who are passionate about making sure that the decisions that are made benefit the community. And all of the meetings are Zoom accessible. So, and if you can't make it at that time, you can send a comment in. But it's that engagement that changes things so much more than anything else. And if you want specific things, I am totally available. I am happy to help anyone prepare for it, but really, truly, it's just talking from yourself. This resolution, this is going to have statewide impact. Like what we're doing here has statewide impact. It will be brought to other CACs and to other CCAs, and you can actually change it because they listen to you.
Awesome.
I guess that's all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much, Anne Olivia. Yeah, yeah, look, we're barely scratching the surface of the topics that we are here today. I encourage everybody to reach out to folks who are here and join the movement and join the coalition, join the alliances, get coordinated and being able to reach out to board members. You know, building out the people power is super important to be able to convince out board members, and they'll pay attention if you get enough people to be able to convince them like there's like some political consequence if they don't follow through. So we are running a little bit behind time, and our last panelist is Eric Veium, a great colleague of mine. And Eric, please talk to us about the environmental protections. I know, you know, environment's implied, but, you know, there's some nuances towards that in terms of protecting deserts and solar panels and things like that. So, you know, talk to us about, you know, why this model language is important for environmental protections. And then, you know, give us a big picture progress report on all the other CCAs, you know, as concisely as you can about where we're at with the statewide picture.
Sure. Thanks for that, Ratha. All right, everyone. Yeah, so let me kind of talk about where we're at in the process, and I think that'll help also kind of zoom in on this question, actually on some of the kind of critical gaps that we have with the policy that's proposed at AVA. And so over the last couple of years, as Ratha mentioned, it started at CC Power, and since then we've been growing our alliance, and it's remarkable the work that we're doing together, bringing labor, environmental justice, climate, and environmental organizations together to advance, you know, our common mission. And there's a variety of reasons that we're doing that. One is, you know, very principled. One is that CCAs, we believe, have an obligation to protect workers in the communities that host their clean energy projects. The other is very practical, is between now and 2045, we need to build 175,000 megawatts of new clean energy resources. That's equivalent to like 80 Diablo Canyon nuclear power plants. So it's just a massive amount, and we're going to need a skilled workforce, a high road workforce that is able to ramp up quickly to build out those resources. And then the last is political. What we're doing together is fundamentally building political power to accelerate climate leadership, high road, equitable climate leadership. And we see CCAs as the major vehicle that is going to be responsible for procuring a majority of that 175,000 new megawatts of clean energy. And so over the last couple of years, we have been strategically campaigning at CCAs, starting at SF Clean Power, Peninsula Clean Energy, Central Coast Community Energy, and now at AVA. There's, as was mentioned, there's 10 of these large CCAs part of CC Power, and our goal is to get CC Power to adopt the policy resolution that we're proposing, generally proposing at AVA, and establishing a industry standard that all CCAs follow, so that we have high road clean energy projects that support workers, support the communities that host the projects, and that ultimately allow us to move faster because we're not leaving people out, building opposition to clean energy. And so that's why this is such a critical piece. And so the ultimate goal here is a statewide industry standard that supports workers and communities. And where we're at AVA right now is we've been we're in negotiations with executive staff, and in general they've been very collaborative, but there are several key areas that we have that there's gaps of concern. One of those areas is, as Alexis has mentioned, which we believe is really critical, is around what we mean by meaningful community engagement. There is some pretty good language there around community benefit, but we included CEJA's document, the CCA report, because it lays out really clearly what's meant by meaningful community engagement. And there's been pushback on staff to not include that because it effectively references, because it's such a rich document that it's too much for them to be comfortable adopting. And so we're trying to find ways to send a clear message. This is what we mean by meaningful community engagement. This is what's expected, and this is what we expect you to communicate to the vendors that are building out these projects, and for the CCA, what's expected for these projects. And so we're still making that part. The other part is around environmental stewardship. Right now, staff is really pushing back on that. We want to include strong language that sends a clear message. That's proactively, we want to avoid spaces that impact species and lands. We want to drive development of these resources into our communities locally, on places that are urban, places that are already disturbed. And if we are, much of this is being built remotely, let's make sure that it's done right in places that minimize impacts on natural spaces and working lands, and that also complies with broader environmental plans that exist in those areas. And so we're getting major pushback on that, and that's going to be a key place that we're going to be asking for all of you to show up and demand that sort of strong proactive language be included. Because again, if we don't have meaningful community engagement, if we're citing projects in places where environmentalists are going to oppose, it's going to slow down our energy transmission, the transition process. And so the reason we're advancing this policy in the way that we are is so that the CCAs set a clear, high standard, and that proactively, thoughtfully communicate how the market responds in terms of what we believe is a good project. So in terms of where we go from here, we really need your help to strengthen our alliance and to show up. The timing right now, their executive staff at AVA potentially would like to bring this policy forward at the next meeting, December 20th. We are not clear that that's in our best interest and may try to push it back a month. So we have potentially a window here for us to get organized and communicate with our board members to close some of those gaps. I just mentioned two of them. There's about a half dozen other gaps, one that Olivia mentioned, and some workforce related things that we can discuss in more detail. So Ratha, anything else that you'd like me to address in my comments?
No, thank you so much, Eric. That was great. I think all of us can talk about this topic for hours, and fortunately we're at 12:50, so we may be able to do a short Q&A. And thank you all to all our panelists, and for all our participants. Really encourage you all to get in touch with everybody here to join the Alliance and find a way to be able to help contribute and get these standards passed. Because if these standards get passed here, they'll be able to get replicated everywhere, and then that's how change and movement building happens. All right, so for our Q&A, we probably have room for maybe 1 or 2 questions. If our panelists can open up the chats and look at the question, and should anybody would like to answer one of these questions, that would be fantastic. I think some of these questions that have been brought in here have been kind of answered within our panelists, like such as, what do we do to have to organize for it? And I think Olivia, answered that in terms of, being able to lobby the board. But yes, panelists, please take a look at the questions. Is there a question that stands out? And if so, please feel free to tap in.
If folks are interested in other ways to get involved beyond lobbying the board, please put my information out. I would be really happy to coordinate with you. This is important. It's really important. I'll let somebody else answer a question, but I would be happy to follow up with anyone individually or as a group.
Ratha, is there a question? I mean, I'm seeing a number of questions here in the chat. Is there any in particular that's jumping out for you as a priority to address?
Yeah, maybe we can tackle this one from Larry Chang. How is staff rationalizing, if at all, AVA's investment in the large Arizona projects? Are they easier or faster to permit? What do they cite as obstacles to pursuing local DER projects?
I can answer some of that.
Yeah, go for it. Who's that?
Okay, so there's a variety of factors that have been presented to us, and I'm not a categorical expert on this, but this is what's been presented. There's some wind projects down there that have a beneficial renewable energy profile, and that's true. There is wind that is produced at a time that we have a hard time getting renewable power. And there's also a bunch of other projects that could be done locally, or the power could be the power could be made up locally. So it's not easy. People aren't being, I believe that people are not being necessarily malicious. It's just that their values and our values may not be the same. So my understanding is that they're trying to get the most power at the lowest cost, period. And there, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money in this utility. And I would love to hear actually what Jessica has to say on this. But we may need some wind in places that has wind at a time that we can't produce it locally. But there's a whole bunch of other things that could also be happening that would impact, that could be diverted locally. And I guess I would turn to Jessica for that.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick. There is a lot of large projects that the agency has to meet resource adequacy. So that is a thing that they do have to make, purchase a certain amount of energy that's required by the CPUC. But I do think that, the local, and when we speak about local, it's not just the production of energy, but also the energy programs and projects that they could be investing in. So that could also be like the electrification, that could also be, the energy efficiency. These are all jobs, right? And then there's also other programs that we advocate for, like more money towards nonprofit organizations to reach community people, sign them up for, programs that they may not know about for debt relief, for example, and also money towards community innovation so that we can fund the projects, like innovative projects that community organizations and community people come up with as solutions to local energy problems. And so there's so many other ways, but we don't have a lot of time to really get into it. So I will stop right there.
Yeah. All right. We are approaching the end of our webinar. And thank you so much to all our panelists for being there. We are going to close out with Jessica. But before so, I want to encourage all our participants again to get in touch with us and stay connected on this issue. We barely have been scratching the surface, and this is work that's been being built up for, you know, quite a couple of years now. And yes, and I now would like to pass it back to my colleague, Jessica Tovar, and to help us close out today's webinar. And, you know, thank you so much, Jessica, for all the work you've been doing. You know, I can't say enough good things about you. You know, this, you know, we a lot of us know Al Weinrub and how Al has passed away. And, you know, I've also been able to work closely with you and see the incredible resilience and leadership that you've been able to show as well. So, you know, if folks are out there, please give Jessica, you know, your props and appreciations.
Thank you so much. For folks who filled out our RSVP, we will follow up with you via email. But we do want to drop in the chat both the model language that was submitted to AVA Community Energy, as well as recent correspondence addressing the issues of the things that they're trying to leave out. We do want to share those documents, and then we will follow up with folks who shared their email. And if you didn't fill out the RSVP, please drop your email in the chat. We will include you in the follow-up report from this discussion, as well as address some of the other questions that we didn't get to. So lastly, I will say, unlike other agencies in California, like the CPUC, for example, what we can do here is actually influence these local community choice programs, and we encourage you to join us in doing that, specifically with AVA Community Energy, that is serving both Alameda County and San Joaquin County. So if you live in any of the Alameda County cities, if you live in Tracy, Stockton, or Lathrop, this directly impacts you. We need your help to guarantee that this policy resolution as submitted by the CCA Workforce and Environmental Justice Alliance is successful. Local folks in AVA Community Energy Territory, please, we invite you to come to the next East Bay Clean Power Alliance meeting, which will be Thursday, December 4th. If somebody could drop my email into chat, it's very easy, jessica@localcleanenergy.org for more details to join that meeting. We will be providing talking points, as this issue will come before the board very soon, just before Christmas. So we want to make sure we get as many of our local folks to advocate to make sure we see this resolution to the finish line in its complete form as we submitted it as the community. The other thing that I would like to say is we also have, and I mentioned this earlier, we're trying to get organizational sign-on support so that we can get $15 million worth of the surplus funds from AVA Community Energy invested in resilience hubs, because we know we need to really build up the resilience and help our communities weather the storm. This really is an issue about survival. And just to highlight again, these community choice programs are raking in record profits. And just with a fraction of that, we can build the resilience programs that we need, as well as create more good jobs in our communities. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much for joining us. Clean power to the people. Again, my email is jessica@localcleanenergy.org. If you want to work with me, and also if you want to get in touch with Olivia or any one of the panelists today, follow up with me, jessica@localcleanenergy.org. Thank you so much.